South Africa's painful history of apartheid is etched into the global consciousness, a reminder of the brutal reality of racial segregation and systemic oppression. Over the years, the term apartheid has re-emerged in the context of Israel's policies in the occupied Palestinian territories, particularly Gaza, where millions of Palestinians live under what many describe as an oppressive system of control and restriction.
Well, the parallels are there between South Africa's apartheid regime and apartheid Israel. And recently, even President Ramaphosa mentioned at the UN General Assembly, at the opening of it, in fact, about the ongoing Israeli occupation and military actions in Gaza and how they compared notably to apartheid. He emphasized the forced displacement, the segregation of Palestinians. But more importantly, I think what we need to recognize is that the whole idea behind apartheid and white supremacy is to keep to deny the actual potential capacity and capability of those whom they are suppressing or oppressing. And this comes through in educational policies, in the way in which they segregate the land, so the creation of Bantustans, denying the individuals, the indigenous people, the right to actually assert their own being, their own identity, their own purpose, their own potential. And then this serves the narrative that Black people are stupid, or that they are lazy, or that they are incapable, and that whites and Westerners and the Europeans are far more modernized, far more progressive, far more intelligent. So this is further than that, also you look at the way in which South Africans were forced to live in Bantustans. They had to carry pass laws and they had to carry passes which were in accordance with pass laws and restricting their movement. They faced blockades and checkpoints, also like the Palestinians. Of course, if we look at it overall, South Africans have faced significant oppression as a result of the apartheid policies. But what Israel has done is it has become far more brutal, far more malicious, and far more vicious in its implementation of apartheid.
South Africa has not only been a voice for its own history, but has also taken a strong stance against human rights abuses globally. When it comes to Israel's treatment of Palestinians, the South African government and many civil society groups have been particularly vocal, condemning it as a form of apartheid. The country has also approached the International Court of Justice against Israel. But how does this stance compare to the international community at large?
Yeah, it certainly looks like history is repeating itself, because during the height of apartheid in South Africa, many Western and settler colonial states, particularly the US, the UK, Australia, and Israel, maintained diplomatic and economic ties with the apartheid regime, of course, Canada as well. So the international anti-apartheid movement was indeed broad. But if you look at key global powers, they continued to support apartheid South Africa due to Cold War interests, economic benefits, and shared ideologies which were related to white supremacy. So if you look at apartheid Israel itself, it maintained strong relations with apartheid South Africa during the 70s and 80s. It engaged in military and nuclear technology cooperation. And even though there was this broader global anti-apartheid movement and it was gaining traction through grassroots efforts, sanctions and boycotts in other parts of the world, these racist settler colonial states continue to support apartheid. And they're doing it now or again. So the situation today regarding Israel mirrors that historical tension. Apartheid Israel, much like apartheid South Africa, enjoys substantial support from Western states. And who are those? Particularly the US. US was one of the states that last came to the party in terms of dismantling apartheid in South Africa. So while providing Israel with financial, military, and diplomatic backing, they claim to be supporting this vision of a world where everyone is equal, but we know that that doesn't exist. So the support persists despite accusations from human rights organizations. And the global anti-apartheid movement against South Africa faced similar resistance initially, and it was not universally or immediately embraced. Now, in terms of geopolitical interests, this indeed plays a significant role in this disparity. If you look at Israel, Israel is a critical ally in the Middle East for Western powers. And though these Western powers claim, make this claim, these racist states make this claim that Israel is to enhance regional stability and support counterterrorism strategies, the reality is that Israel is the single most destabilizing entity in West Asia. It is the number one terrorist state in the region, engaged in all sorts of terrorist activities, including funding, mobilizing, and supporting ISIS. And furthermore, many of the nations that supported apartheid South Africa share legacies of settler colonialism, white supremacy, and support for maintaining Western global dominance, which is reflected in their continued support for Israel today. So finally, if I may put it this way, while the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa eventually gained strong governmental support, it only happened after decades of grassroots pressure, boycotts, and a shift in public opinion. And one can very well ask that this opinion shifted after so many decades in South Africa. How did it regress now in terms of Palestine? How do they go back into their racist boxes and now suddenly supporting the Israeli occupation and the apartheid state? So civil society is critical here, as was the case in South Africa, in the South African struggle. But broader governmental action has lagged behind due to entrenched geopolitical and economic alliances, I would say.
During the apartheid era, there was a powerful global boycott movement, sanctions, and widespread condemnation. The fight against apartheid in South Africa wasn't won solely through political pressure. It was also fueled by grassroots movements, civil society organizations, and global solidarity networks. These groups played an instrumental role in putting pressure on the apartheid regime and rallying global support.
So, as I mentioned previously already, that civil society is key here. And if you look at South Africa's anti-apartheid legacy, it serves as a powerful moral framework for supporting Palestine. Many countries that once backed the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa are now calling for justice in Palestine. And this includes key BRICS members and other global South nations. So the blueprint for global solidarity, if I may call that, was essential in defeating apartheid. It is now being used as a model for Palestinian self-determination. South African civil society, on the other hand, which has been integral to the fight against apartheid, has remained vocal and actively mobilizing international support for Palestinian rights through boycotts, sanctions, and divestment campaigns. I think the problem is not so much with African states or previously colonized states, but the problem is more in West Asia. If you look at, the mentality and the understanding of the ordinary people in countries like, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Tunisia, also Egypt, and Turkey, for instance, people are still very much ignorant about what apartheid is, what it did in South Africa, what it's doing in Palestine, and how boycotts, divestment, sanctions is critical to reshaping this. I think in countries like Pakistan, you still have a significant amount of awareness, Malaysia, Indonesia, but far more needs to be done in Muslim majority countries to raise the understanding and the level of awareness of what they need to do. And the thing that they really can do, those who feel helpless, is to hurt the pocket, to hurt the occupation in the place where it is most volatile, and that is economically. And BDS, boycotts, divestment, sanctions, has to become far more, entrenched, and people should be supporting it without question.
South Africa's experience with apartheid and its eventual triumph over the system has positioned the country as a beacon of hope for movements fighting for justice around the world. This unique history gives South Africans a particular perspective on struggles for freedom and equality elsewhere.
So, as a BRICS member, South Africa plays a vital role in a coalition that is redefining the global economic and political order. Basically, what they're doing is emphasizing the importance of a multipolar world, a shift away from Western hegemony, and which aligns with if you look at it, with the global South's resistance to neo-colonial structures and foreign interventions. Now, very significantly, BRICS has prioritized non-interventionist and anti-imperialist principles. These resonate strongly with the legacy of anti-apartheid struggles in South Africa. South Africans understand this. They identify with this. And I think the entire African continent is what shall I say, woke to this reality as well. Now, in a multipolar world, South Africa has greater leverage to advocate for justice in Palestine. Unlike the post-apartheid era, where much of South Africa's diplomatic alignment was with the West, South Africa now finds itself as part of a bloc that questions the US and Western influence on global affairs, including its uncritical support for apartheid and racism. It is as if we have matured, or we have come out, or we have finally broken those shackles of fear, that we are able to articulate and to voice and to raise our voices on very important questions. South Africa has been particularly vocal also within the AU, the African Union, regarding Israel's controversial observer state. And if you look at Minister Naledi Pandor, her consistent opposition to Israel's position within the AU. I mean, why should a white settler colonial state, which is established on problematic frameworks by a UN that does not fully embody the nation states of today, and which identifies itself as white, superior, and European, even be entertained in the African Union? So this is ridiculous. The African Union itself has long been a platform for promoting decolonization and self-determination. And South Africa's leadership in blocking Israel's influence within the AU has been critical. So what we see here is that South Africa has exhibited a moral and political continuity in terms of the liberation struggle and the Palestinian cause. And it has been raising those issues against a Western-dominated global order, creating new spaces for anti-colonial and anti-imperialist discourse. If you look at it, what we know about the West, and despite its claims of progress and superiority, coming from a Western civilization that has been exceptionally violent, we should consider Samuel Huntington himself, where he said, "The West won the world not by the superiority of its ideas or values or religion, but rather by its superiority in applying organized violence." And Westerners often forget this fact. And that's why I said it's like history repeating itself, because these racist Western states have forgotten, about the mobilization against apartheid South Africa. They've forgotten about the racism. They've also forgotten about the organized violence. But we, the global South, the non-Westerners, we don't forget this.